about controlling. So at a certain point, I agree that the politically correct are ignorant at the grassroots level. But above it, there's a more sinister plan.
Well, I think that power, everyone loves power, and the left has certainly taken over the universities and also the media. But now, you know, I don't just blame the left for taking over. I also blame the conservatives for having given up. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a very religious town and fairly conservative, although not as much as the surrounding states. And there's no real cry for the ending of censorship. That is, the conservatives are not raising enough hell, Alex, just to put it bluntly, nor are the Christians. We're all being a little too nice. The cancer of nice is killing us, man.
Well, you look at the PNAC documents that are from so-called conservatives, and Dick Cheney and others write about we need a big Pearl Harbor event, catalyzing event, and then we can go in and basically have a clash of civilizations and control the grand chessboard. That's actually a Zbigniew Brzezinski idea of occupying the Middle East, not to reform it, but to then control the crossroads of Europe and Asia and control Russia and China. But regardless, they've only started up and are now allied with the more radical elements. How does Saudi Arabia feed into all this?
Interesting question. Let me give you an example. You've heard of Chechnya?
Yes.
Well, the Chechen jihadists are the most vicious. They are the supreme jihadists. Now then, you need to understand that Chechnya used to be a Sufi-based kind of Islam. That is, singing, dancing, sort of the loving side of Islam. Well, Islam came in the form of Wahhabism with Islamic money, in particular Saudi money, and now then the Chechens have become vicious jihadists. This effect is being seen in places like Malaysia, where Saudi Arabia moved into. In Malaysia, you had a Hindu form of Islam. That is, there was a Hindu culture there, and the Islam had not penetrated down to destroy all the Hinduism. But now then, with Wahhabi money coming in, we see now in in Malaysia, the rise of a more vicious kind of Islam. So what is happening is that the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia have infinite sums of money. You must surely know that Saudi Arabia is spending more money to Islamicize the world. 80% of the mosques in America are built by the Saudis than the Soviet Union did at the height of the Cold War.
So we're in a war with a militarized system that uses a religion as its cult control system, and it is proselytizing and radicalizing all other forms of Islam around the world and successfully taking over all the way down into Central Africa and Western Africa and Eastern Africa, all the way as far east as Indonesia. This is massive, with our own governments bringing them in mass.
Oh, well, I don't think our government is resisting Islam anything at all. As a person who speaks to the subject of Islam, let me tell you what happens to those who do. I'm called a racist, a bigot, a hater, and Islamophobe. You're probably called the same thing. What's interesting about this verbiage is it never says, well, now, Bill, you know, when you say there's two different Muhammads, a religious preacher and a violent jihadist, you're wrong. No. They say that I am a bad person because I bring these facts up. So once again, we've lost the ability to reason together.
Sure, you're not supposed to quote Muhammad, who within, his life took over an entire region. And then within 100 years of his death, let's go over some of the history when we come back from break here of the expansion of Islam. Because we hear it's this religion of peace. The Pope has come out and said that he's very troubled about saying Europe's Christian, that he, what's the word, abhors it? What's the exact word? He dreads the Christian nature of Europe. Wow, is the new Pope, is he actually an ambassador of Saudi Arabia now?
Well, I'm afraid the Pope does not seem to demonstrate any knowledge of Islam. He may have some, but he certainly doesn't demonstrate it. He just attended a meeting with a Grand Imam from Al-Azhar University, and the two of them came out with, we're going to give peace a chance. You could just hear John Lennon in the background, and that the true nature of Islam is all about peace. And so they're going to.
When it was Islam that destroyed the last Christian seat of the old world in Constantinople, folks may have heard of it. It's now called Istanbul. We'll be back. There's a lot of different university maps out there, but you can just Google Islam Today, map of the world, or you can also look at a group of maps, Islam over time and its spread, and Europe almost collapsed. But when you go to college, you're taught that Europe invaded, and there's all these movies made by Hollywood where Europe invaded the Middle East for no reason. They were bad and they were horrible. Look, Europe did all sorts of barbarous stuff, but this is the place where the Renaissance came from. Everybody wants to come here because we created the modern world. And I see it as a form of cuckolding or suicide of the West to just bring in the most radical of these people and then say we have to submit to them. We're talking to Dr. Bill Warner of politicalislam.com, highly requested, obviously, and I've read some of his books, seen his work. It's all spot on from my research, but he just lays it all out and gets demonized for it. This is a fact. So let's talk about the history of it some, sir. And this is a short segment, long segment coming up. The boil down of how it's expanded and where you see it going.
Well, the expansion started with Muhammad. Remember, he was in Mecca, then he went to Medina. This movement from Mecca to Medina is called the Hijrah. That is the migration. The Islamic calendar is based upon the Hijrah. Why? Because it was migration that brought Islam its success. Now, fast forward 1,400 years, and what's happening in Europe? We have a new Hijrah. We have a new migration. And it's important to know that Hijrah is a form of jihad. Now, then, I don't doubt but what there's some of these so-called, quote, Syrian refugees who are actually economic migrants, and they're not jihadists. But nevertheless, we do have to understand that Islam has a doctrine of jihad that is based upon migration. And as soon as Muhammad died, Islam started bursting out of the Middle East, took over the Middle East. And let's stop right here and deal with the question. The Crusades, as we're taught in the West, is they were an evil act by evil Christians who were going to invade the pure land of Islam, the Middle East, and do bad things. Hello, before Muhammad, the Middle East was Christian. It was Islam that invaded the Christian lands of the Middle East, not the European knights of the Crusades. So somehow or another, we've managed to get all of this history turned inside out. But it was the case that the Crusades were a defensive move, trying to reclaim the Middle East for Christians. Now, it succeeded only a part, but nevertheless, its intent was reestablishing what was originally there in the Middle East anyway, which was a Christian nation, or a series of nations. I mean, Iraq used to be Christian. North Africa was Christian. Egypt was Christian. Turkey was Christian. Even Persia was half Christian. But this is all gone under the jihad and the migration of Islam. So I think we need to reacquaint ourselves with our history. And when I say our history, I'm saying that the history of Europe is also the same as the history of the United States, and even in a strange way, the history of Japan and others. Because I'm talking about a meta-civilization here, not just a European civilization, but a civilization based on two critical points. One, the ethical principle of the Golden Rule, or unitary ethics, and the second is the intellectual principle of critical thought. Because that's what our civilization is based on, and it's not just ours, but others. It's important to know that Islam denies the Golden Rule because it doesn't have one. It creates Kafirs and Muslims, which is not a unified view of humanity. So these are all some elements of history which unfortunately seem to be lost upon our current scholars in the universities.
And of course, we have this whole Wahhabist system that was one of the most radical forms ever that, from my research, correct me if I'm wrong, was basically based on the slave trade and robbing caravans. And then that somehow got linked up with British intelligence in 1900. They gave it funding to make that the brand of Islam around the Middle East. What an insane program.
And by the way, let me challenge you on the use of one word here. The Wahhabis are not extremist or radical.
They are the original then. You're saying they're the real deal.
Oh, no, they're the real deal. They're the 24 karat. The same with Islamic State.
So I'm using a politically correct term when I say radical Islam. The truth is bona fide original jihad Islam.
Died in the wool. Died in the wool.
Orthodox.
Yeah, orthodox. Exactly. Islamic State is pure orthodoxy. The Wahhabis are pure orthodoxy. Everything they do and say, look, Islamic State goes through a lot of trouble. I read their material. They go through a lot of trouble to justify what they do. For instance, they were criticized for taking sex slaves. Islamic State says, hey, look at the data, look at the information. Muhammad had sex slaves. All the companions of Muhammad, except for one, had sex slaves. The Quran gives the right for sex slaves, so don't criticize us for being bad Muslims.
And then the left worships them. The left is not the left. They're mentally ill demons.
You know, it's really odd. I support equal rights for women and attack the Sharia attack on women's rights. And yet, because I support the equality of women and oppose the Sharia view of women, I'm called a bigot and a hater.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't support generally mutilating women and putting bags over their heads and keeping them as slaves and kidnapping 5-year-old girls and trans-shipping them to be in snuff films, you're a bad person. We are going to have at least 2 hours of live coverage kicking off at 7 o'clock Central of the big primaries happening out in the West, California, the big prize. We've got Leanne McAdoo and Joe Biggs out there reporting. We've got our other reporters at Bilderberg 2016 in Dresden, Germany. The admitted founder of the EU is a Bilderberg Group member, Peter Sutherland. He's the head of the EU and UN Migration and Borders Committees, both of them. And he's openly told the BBC and others, we want to get rid of the whiteness of Europe. It's inherently bad. Well, if you said get rid of the blackness of Africa, that'd be inherently racist. But it's beyond that. The globalists aren't planning to get rid of everybody in the West. They're planning to just bring in incredible tyranny. But to do that first, they've got to bring in huge, uncompatible groups, and then we're all told to comply with them or the Muslims will blow you up. And I said clearly that's where this is going a few years ago. Now they're actually in the news saying, we can't allow Germans to march and say, control our borders, because that might make the immigrants upset. See, not because they care about the immigrants, they're playing everyone off against each other, and the globalists are so authoritarian and have deals with Saudi Arabia now, they think this is controllable. They're on power trips. They're delusional. Or maybe they don't care if we all fall to radical Islam, which is dominant Orthodox Islam in 50 years. I just know this. I have 2 daughters, and I have been at the Domain in North Austin now. I even have photos of it. We're going to do a report soon. Like I just talked about it, had the memory, and I got physically nauseous. And I was at Barton Creek Mall. I don't go to the mall very often. And I'm telling you, I guess that's the culture to be in the markets at night or whatever. It was every turn was women with full outfits on, full heads covered up. The burqas, not just the hijabs. And these women are born into slavery. These women are, and some of them are under Stockholm Syndrome. I mean, they go along with it and will defend it and teach their kids to blow themselves up. But Austin, you go downtown, folks, it is crawling with Muslims in their full gear. And in the first waves, they're all, pro-West, westernized, all this, not now. Finishing up with our guests, I want to invite back for a full hour in the near future. I really appreciate the doctor coming on with us. His website, everybody should check it out. It's politicalislam.com. Dr. Bill Warner. Summing this up in the next 5-6 minutes, is anything I'm saying wrong on those fronts? Where is it going? Where do you see it ending? I mean, Europe is premeditatedly doing this. Why?
By the way, I was recently in, well, it was a year or so ago, was in Macedonia. And I was throughout the entire Balkans, which was a really educational trip. And when I was in Macedonia, I saw all these new mosques being built, and they're being built by the Turks, the Neo-Ottomans. The Turks have moved in and set up schools. Now, one of the things they will do at these schools is if you, as a Macedonian, will become a Muslim and wear the garb, they will pay you each month a salary for wearing Islamic garb. This is a form of civilizational war, which is brilliant.
That's right. That's why MSNBC, CNN bombs you with women in hijabs on TV, bombs you with how liberal, and the liberal magazines now, even women that the top liberals wear it. I could be a sex slave too. Exactly. So that's it. This is to throw it in our face.
By the way, the name of your show is The War We Should Be Fighting. This war of bullets and bombs that Bush did and that Obama's done, that is not how to defeat Islam. This is an information war. This is a war of ideas, not bullets and bombs.
Yes, sir. And I'm sorry for interrupting you. Get back into that in a moment, but you're absolutely on target. They're flaunting it. And I've been in London just filming a public building, and Muslims run over, you don't film me. Like, I mean, they're very aggressive. So go back to this war, what they're doing.
Well, the word jihad is not well understood. It does not mean holy war. There are 4 kinds of jihad. There's the jihad of the sword. That's like on 9/11. That's violence, murder, and killing. Then there's jihad of speech, jihad of writing, and the jihad of money. The jihad of war is not our problem. The jihad of murder, we can deal with that. We have professional cops. We have professional soldiers. The war that's killing us, Alex, is the war of speech and writing. It is the war of ideas. Because what we're doing now is we're saying that if you have the right ideas, then you can be condemned as being a racist, hater, Islamophobe.
Clearly, we're losing the war to Orthodox Islam. We're losing the info war.
Yes, exactly.